Hey, Geekscapists, welcome to a brand new Geekscape podcast. I'm Jonathan London, your host. If this is your first Geekscape, strap yourselves in for some pop culture talk, movies, video games, comic books, TV, and in this case, music with an emphasis on the pop. I am so excited about this episode. It is all about this brand new, as one of my heroes, Dr. Frank, who's been on Geekscape several times. And I've just asked Dr. Frank to come back on the show. He's got a reissue of his solo album coming up. So I asked if Frank can come back. But he would call this a balbum, a book and an album. And that's what we're talking about. This is really an incredible book. I just finished it today. It's an oral history of the Hollywood Geek Rock scene in the 90s and 2000s. You might be most familiar with them through the band Weezer, which changed so many of our geek trajectories when we first started hearing them. I remember being in a drive-through after a basketball practice in early high school when I heard Buddy Holly on the radio, and it felt like when I first put Kerplunk on my ears after standing outside the Kerplunk thing. I was standing outside the record store there in Austin, and I just saw the cover of Kerplunk, and I was like, it looks like a comic book. I like comic books. And the second the 2000 light years away hit my ears, I was like, I don't have to listen to my brother's Red Hot Chili Peppers albums anymore. Like, this is mine. This is my music. And that got me into the pop punk and into all the lookout bands. I scoured all the bins for all that stuff. But then in Austin, there was a local band called the Impossibles. They were a pop punk, they were a ska punk band. And as soon as the Blue Album came out, they used to be called the Fat Girls. And then as soon as the Blue Album came out, they became the Impossibles. You started seeing all these influences go through that Austin music scene. It was a wave, and the wave originated right here in Los Angeles and Hollywood. And we have a show all about the bands that came out of it. One of them, Nerf Herder, is a regular guest. Linus of Hollywood and Perry Grip have been on Geekscape regularly. I just think that this music's amazing. I'm only doing Geekscape because I love broadcasting and talking to people, interviewing people. And longtime listeners know that in college, I went to college solely for college radio, so I could interview bands and talk to bands with my co-host, Kevin McCaffrey. And this is the music that Kevin introduced me to the most. He said, hey, if you want to go past Weezer, there's bands like Ridel High. Steve Coulter from Ridel High is here to talk about Generation Blue, which he wrote under his nom de plume, S.W. Lauden. And Chopper One, and formerly of Weezer's Jason Cropper, is here as well to talk about that scene. And I have not seen Jason in 24 years. I met him in a single night in 2000 through Kevin. Maybe if it's Redondo Beach. I think it's Redondo Beach. And we went to his practice space, and Kevin and he had been corresponding over email because we'd been playing Chopper One on the radio, and we just idolized that stuff. We loved these bands. And I saw Jason again for the first time in 24 years last Sunday because Linus and Perry and those guys were doing a release for Mr. S.W. Lauden's book. And I went up and I said, hey, Jason, don't mean to interrupt. I met you 24 years ago. And I think he said something along the lines of, yeah, Kevin the red-haired guy. And I was like, how did you remember me from 24 years ago? And whether or not he was putting on or not, it doesn't matter. It was awesome. And this is my music. If you're a geek and you're a Geekscapist watching this, then this is probably your music too. So we're going to get in on that real quick. Just some bookkeeping notes. If you're looking at the feed, there's a lot of content on there, and I do want to slow up and give you guys a little bit more paced Geekscape. Next week we have Comic-Con Revolution in Ontario. I'm going to be there covering both days. Heidi's going to be with me. We're going to be doing some interviews similar to the episode we did at Pasadena Comic-Con a few weeks ago and LA Comic-Con before that. I don't think I'm moderating any panels, but the audio feeds, we're going to look for that stuff. I'm not going to be doing any video there. Video-wise, though, last week's show was a lot of fun, talking comics and creating comics and all that. Comics is my first love. And guys, I say all sorts of silly stuff on the show. I don't know who's listening, but then I end up getting like a DM like this. This is from Matthew Peters, who's listening, and he goes, thanks for the Saskatchewan shout out on episode 692. I made a joke that Saskatchewan is so remote it's not going to get a free comic book day. that you can't get to a comic book store. And he said, I actually made it to the comic book shop for free comic book day on my snowmobile. So you make fun of people in Saskatchewan for not getting a free comic book day, and they put it in your face and say, no, we got a free comic book day, dude. You're an adult. So Matt, thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me know that Saskatchewan has joined the 21st century. I'm just kidding, dude. Listen, that's why I host Geekscape and interview the people who actually have done the things, because I'm like a mile wide and an inch deep on knowledge of any of this stuff. So Matt, thanks for reaching out and making fun of me for calling Saskatchewan the end of the earth. So talking about free comic book day, if you're on the audio feed, you're going to see that the last episode, we had a surprise episode. Golden Apple Comics here in Hollywood had me down there to host a free Geekscape in front of a live audience, and it was great. It was so much fun. We talked comics. We gave away a ton of these. Disney just gave us all these free steel books, these Blu-ray steel books. I think they're like $40-$50. We gave out like 20 of them. It was crazy. And we just had a blast on Free Comic Book Day doing a live show. It was awesome. My buddy Mark, who's writing the new Violator Spawn series for Todd McFarlane, talked about that. Violator, I think, is like a demon. I don't read Spawn, but if you're a Spawn fan, Violator's getting his own series, and and Mark is writing it, and we talk all about that. And so, big comic book fans are going to know what I'm talking about. All right, let's get to music. Let me start the show. We'll come back. My buddy Eric Ernst is co-hosting this one with me because he is a specialist in this whole genre, and he loves Ridel High. He loves these bands, and he's got his own music show as well. So we'll be right back, and we'll be talking Generation Blue. Are you guys excited? I'm excited. Let me just find the theme song and get you guys there. Here we go. It doesn't stop. The geek stuff doesn't stop. Since that day I worked in a comic book store back in high school in Austin, Texas, it's been nothing but geek. Mark and Draco is my buddy who's writing the Violator series for Todd McFarlane, and his book starts in August. Well, I was doing the theme song. This is how geeky Geekscape is. Marilyn Gigliotti just texted me, and she's Veronica in Clerks, another 90s era movie and influence on me, and she's got this. She says, hi Jonathan, hope you're well. I have received information for a short film, The Vote, that I participated in a couple of months back. It will be screening at Los Angeles Latino International Film Festival. You can use it. Oh, and she has tickets, so if you're in LA, we're going to promote this screening of her new film here in LA, and hopefully you guys come out to it June 1st. So the geek stuff finds me because you put it out there. But that's cool. It's fun. A little bit of factoid for you Geekscapists. The box in Clerks that was supposed to have the lasagna in it, it was empty. Totally empty. Just an empty box. The first time Marilyn ever brought anybody lasagna was on this show, and you guys were there. It was an episode where I had Marilyn on, and she brought me lasagna for Geekscape, and that's kind of cool. All right, here we go. Let's bring in the author himself, S.W. Lauden, Steve Coulter from Ridel High and more. Hey, dude, congrats on the book. I really loved it.
Oh, man, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on the show and for coming out. Speaking of Saskatchewan, you came all the way out to Monrovia, which is a lot of people had no idea that was part of the greater Los Angeles area, to see our launch party, and that's where we met. So thank you for that.
I love Monrovia. It has a Sonic.
Yes.
One of the only Sonics out there off the 210. And to be fair, we were coming back from Big Bear, and I saw Linus Dodson's post, and I was like, Heidi, can we please stop by this on the way back to LA? And she's like 6-7 months pregnant, and I was like, please, 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 please. And she did, and she loved it, and she thought it was great. And she also got to meet this man coming up, Mr. Jason Cropper.
Hey.
Hey, Jason, how are you, man?
Good to see you, Jonathan. Good to see you.
Guys, that was a love fest there in Monrovia with all your friends from this scene, and I did not know how deep it went. Marco DeSantis was like, you got to pick up this album because the stories are so great. And in Weezer's not, guys, maybe you're going to pick it up because you're a fan of Weezer, maybe because you're a fan of Nerf Herder or the Rentals or any of those bands. What I didn't appreciate when I first read it, or before I read it, was how integrated they are and continue to be. Sometimes when you hear about these bands, but reading later in the book, how many times the members of Weezer or the members, anybody who had any incremental success or any amount of success, they reached back and they brought people forward to write on, whether it be a Weezer album or put out or produce a Chopper One album or drum on an album or be a member of the Rentals, or it was awesome. Like my records. And I met Joey Cape at a Nerf Herder show last year, and it was one of my highlights because I loved the Lagwagon and all that stuff. I sent Marco DeSantis a message, and it's like, dude, the whole My Records thing is mind-blowing to me because I didn't know that guys in Face to Face or the guys in Lagwagon who got me into this punk stuff were responsible for this next chapter of music, which is your scene. Mm-hmm. And how much we have to give thanks to it, and just how much love there was. Really, it's pretty amazing.
I'm glad you kind of keyed into that, because one of my favorite things, I did like 25, 30 interviews for that book over the course of about 18 months, maybe more than that, but that's about the number. And I loved hearing people say that the members of Weezer or the members of the Rentals or other bands that were part of that scene were helping each other. And I think I knew it sort of intuitively in real time as it was happening, because bands were helping us and we were helping bands. But just the endless amount of stories of people having some kind of success and reaching out and helping these other bands was really incredible, and became sort of the through line of the whole narrative for the book.
And I just met Marco late last year in November through Max Bernstein and Kai Dodson, who Kai Geekscape, as you go back in maybe just a couple months, and Kai was on the show. He's fantastic, and you guys had a lot of great response to him. Let me bring in someone I met at a recent Green Day concert, my friend Eric Ernst, who I said, dude, you got to co-host this with me, because you have your own Spotify, basically radio show where you talk about all this kind of music, and you're the biggest Ridel High fan I know. Eric, come in here, man.
Hey,
you want to borrow this, don't you?
I don't want to borrow it because I already have my own copy. It's on its way.
Oh my dude!
So, I appreciate the generous offer to borrow it. I'm gonna got my own coming.
Oh my god! As I'm reading this, I was like, Kevin in Singapore, my former college radio co-host, has to read this because he introduced me to every single one of these bands but Weezer, and Eric Ernst needs to read this because you sent me a picture just of your entire CD library, and I just see spines from all these albums, dude. Like, maybe some of this isn't news to you. Maybe you're just gonna read the book and be like,
yeah. No, I'm kidding. I had a great love. Most of us, we kind of had a outside of LA, I should say, most of us had a Weezer were the gate that opened. And once you started exploring, you found, there's a ton of other music that's a lot like this and is just as good. And I just kept digging from there. And that led me to Chopper One. It led me to Ridel High, the Rentals and That Dog, and all these other bands that came out of that scene, and just fell in love with all of it. So I had this voracious appetite finding new music at the time. And through different the compilations that were the lifeblood of the 90s, and I'm sure we'll talk about later, Usenet groups were huge for this discovery at the time too.
Yeah, the one thing that I thought was great was learning about I just wasn't a part of it, but the Weezer fan club that was run by Michael and Carly, and then how later groups like Ozma, who were younger, started using the internet going into that stuff. And again, around the time we were playing this stuff on the radio. You guys can pick up Generation Blue at bigstirrecords.com. I want to say that because if you want to be like Eric and pick up your own copy of the album, Generation Blue, you're going to get it at bigstirrecords.com. Steve also has a really cool Substack that I started subscribing to that I just love because it's a lot of the material that's here, but you also throw some topical stuff in there, some maybe drum centric stuff in there. I found it super informative, and I got to tell you, somebody who can't play a lick of an instrument, I found it really awesome that you also put playlists on there.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the playlists. Some people get up in arms about the Spotify stuff sometimes, but yeah, I just include a lot of music and try to focus on not just the music I grew up with, but music that was inspired by the music I grew up with. So I end up talking to and writing about a lot of young bands. And much to my glee, there's a lot of really excellent pop rock being made and released these days by musicians around the world. Bands like the Whiffs, the Beths from New Zealand, Hurry from Philadelphia, Second Grade from Philadelphia. There's a great scene in Los Angeles right now with bands like Uni Boys and Billy Tibbles, and they're all tied into the Lemon Twig scene. So it's bubbling up right now.
Yeah, okay, Eric knew what you were saying. But
The Whiffs are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
The Whiffs are awesome. The Beths are awesome. And there's a ton of great that people say, oh, there's no more great music. There's lots of it out there, and you have more access to it than you ever have. It's just a matter of you having to go find it.
Yeah, it's not just the Kendrick and Drake fight, guys. There's more. There's more to music than just that. All right, and I love having you guys on because you can expose the Geekscape audience to a lot of that stuff. Because it did one thing that the book does have a melancholiness to it at some point where you have this beautiful scene that happens for years, and it works for some people. It doesn't work for others. And then it's over. And I just remember as I would go back home to Austin, seeing the bands who'd called it quits out of the scene that I grew up out of, that I loved. And you'd see the bands that were like, oh, did you know that Latchkey Kids got a deal, or that this band got a deal and not this band, and then this band got a deal and it dried up, like a story like the Shuffle Puck story, where Interscope never released an album that was probably brilliant by what everybody says. And I think about a band like Fourth Grade Nothing out of Austin, who came out to LA, recorded a big album that everybody was really excited for, and all you get is the opening song to Biodome. that's what it ended up doing. And it's just like, well, fuck,
yeah,
because that's not fair, and so having the scene end, I just felt that it was beautiful. That everybody just still had kind of this love for each other. Jason, the other thing that I appreciate, and I feel really rude coming up and talking to you last Sunday and not talking to Amy, was just how involved she was. And I apologize for that, because having read the book, Amy is your co-pilot in that.
Well, we got divorced in 2003.
And so that was not Amy at the project. That was Amy was involved there. Yeah,
that was my wife, Susan. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heidi is my second wife. She's back there putting together her cosplay for Comic-Con Revolution. So I understand that. So sorry about that confusion. But the people who were involved in that and not involved in it, there's a lot of unspoken heroes in the book.
There's a ton of people who couldn't be there. For every, I was thinking about the Weezer fans that were there, who many of whom had come from out of state and some even out of country to go to
Monrovia.
Well, to go to a secret, I think Weezer is doing like a secret Blue Album show every week somewhere in LA in front of 200 or 300, small.
With like Dogstar too. That one over in Highland Park was with Dogstar, which is hilarious.
I was there. It was amazing.
Jealous.
So for every 10 people that were there, from whatever, whether they were musicians in the scene or probably not the family members of the musicians, but the musicians or the fans, there were, easily, 5-10 other bands that weren't represented, right? Mm-hmm. And then easily, for every every hardcore Weezer fan that was there that knows about this scene and all of these, the culture, the petri dish of, Weezer scene bands, there have to be like thousands of people all over the world who would have loved to have been there.
It's pretty awesome to see just how far-reaching a band like Chopper One did, and there are people who maybe they're hearing about Chopper One for the first time now. Maybe they did it on the radio show like I did 20 plus years ago.
I mean, it was.
No, I think but when I read that you guys are playing in touring Europe and you're hanging out with some major people over in London or in Europe on these tours, I was like, no, I actually remember this completely. I think this stuff is huge. Like when Ozma went out on tour with Weezer and the Get Up Kids, it was like, whoa, they're taking Ozma out. They're taking, I mean, they're taking the Get Up Kids out? Like that was huge for both of those bands, especially Ozma, because at that point the Green Album, it was kind of maybe coming out, but people didn't really know how they felt about it, and it took a while for Pinkerton to show up, and we wondered if this scene was going to continue. Was there anything that didn't make the book that you wanted? Was there a story that you'd heard, Steve, that you were like, I got to talk to this person, it just didn't happen, or I have to get this angle, and it just didn't materialize enough to include it as a substantial part of this book?
I mean, happily, 98% of the people that I reached out to eventually got back to me, and we either had a live conversation like this, or we traded emails and I just asked them questions back and forth. I have enough material left over to do 3 more books like the one that I did. Like I have a lot of content left over, and at some point I'm going to have to figure out what that means.
Yeah.
Maybe I can get another 11 songs from these bands and we can do, volume 2.
I like that.
But no, what I found, and this gets back to what you were saying in the opening, was maybe it was just the right moment to have these conversations again. Maybe just the right amount of time had gone by, but everybody was very open with me about that era, and the feelings were very good and positive. And even when negative things happened in retrospect, getting your record shelved or somebody screwing you over in a band or getting fired from your band or the things that happen when you're part of a rock scene, nobody was holding grudges. They were just happy to reconnect, and they were happy to tell these stories, and they were happy that somebody was interested in getting this music back out there. So it wasn't just a love fest in what I chose to publish, but it was also a love fest in the response that I got from the people that I reached out to, which was amazing. And that just doesn't include the bands. That includes bookers. It includes Todd Sullivan, who signed Weezer to Geffen. It includes Larry Mann, who booked that Dog Star show, that Weezer's first show. And then went on to start Poptopia, which was one of 2 major pop festivals that were happening in LA at the time that supported this scene. I mean, Jason and I, our bands would be on these stacked bills on Poptopia every year. So no, there was nothing that I felt I didn't have access to. And I'm just thankful that everybody was so giving and open with their memories about that time.
Was there a story that was a revelation to you? Was there something that you learned, because you and Jason were there, you guys were in the trenches. I love any mention of the Muffs, who are to this day, I mean, rest in peace, Kim Shattuck, but they're the loudest band I've ever seen in my entire life. No band made my ears ring as much in regret not wearing, the Muffs were the loudest band I've ever seen in my entire life. They're awesome. I still play them all the time. And they were on those Poptopia shows. Wax, oh my god, Wax is incredible. All those, and then getting into the younger bands like we used to play Kara's Flowers on the radio, and then suddenly you look up their Maroon 5, and that happened at a Poptopia show. Or Phantom Planet with Jason Schwartzman, who a lot of people only know from the movies that he does with Wes Anderson. But Phantom Planet, he was one of the first 2 members of Phantom Planet.
Great drummer, really great drummer, Keith Moon kind of drummer.
And so, with you guys were there stories that were revelations to you, where you're like, wait, that happened? Whoa, I was there, but it maybe happened around the corner, or happened a week later, or happened, and I wasn't privy to it until I did the research here.
For me, I'll let Jason answer too, but for me, it was all the Connecticut stuff, like hearing all the stories from those guys about what it was like to discover Quiet Riot, when they're 12 years old. And that's what inspired them to play in all the silly heavy metal bands they put together, and how diehard they were into heavy metal, and just how committed they were to the metal cause, that they pulled up stakes and moved to LA to be part of the Sunset Strip hair metal scene of all things. They had that crowd, which included Rivers on lead guitar, but Kevin Ridel, who later started Ridel High, was the singer of Avant Garde. Justin Fisher, who I describe as the Zelig of the geek rock scene, because he's been like in every band. He lived at the Amherst house. You know, he was the bass player in Avant Garde. So like hearing the origin story and how they went from being Avant Garde and Zoom, which were straight up hair metal bands, to 3 years later being Weezer and Shufflepuck and the Rentals and Cockeyed Ghost. That stuff was really eye-opening for me. And I lived here during all the hair metal stuff. My older brothers were in hair metal bands. I would roadie for them when I was like 15 at Gazzari's, you know, so I saw all that stuff. But hearing those stories about the transition from Connecticut to LA was the most eye-opening and fun for me. But Jason, I don't know about for you.
Yeah, every interaction with Rivers back then, before Weezer started, was super eye-opening and just so genuine and so fun. I mean, the guy he's really smart, but you know, you were talking earlier, Jonathan, about him taking Ozma on the road and the Get Up Kids. It's calculated, but it's also in the moment and very serendipitous and very he lives and works and plays from the same place, and it's just a very loving and fun-seeking. You know, he just has the guy's just a little bit different. You know, he's having a really good time, and when he's not having a good time, you know it if you're close to him, if you interact with him. But when he is, there's almost nothing better. And so I think a big part of the magic of that whole scene was Rivers just digging deep after Avant-Garde and Zoom and sort of the crash and burn of the metal scene and the crash and burn of that artistic vehicle, and deciding that he really did want to be he still wanted to be a rock star. He still wanted to do that, but an artist, and what that really meant to him, and finding that and keeping it fun and keeping it interesting and keeping it expansive from a heart-based place. And all those people at that, at the reunion, if you will, for Steve's release here, you could feel it. Everybody there still feels like they were part of and are part of something really unique and special.
I thought it was really cool to read about the Amherst house, specifically because in the garage, the Weezer song that, like, when I heard that that Weezer was name dropping Nightcrawler and Kitty Pryde and D&D, that instantly became my band. And then so you have this mythological idea of the garage, like this garage, but it wasn't just Weezer's garage. And that was a revelation to me for the book, is that so many bands were in that Amherst house where that garage was. And then, on a song that came out way later, the most recent, like, Van and Weezer album, some of the writing on that album is accredited back to Kevin Ridel from Ridel High, who, Rivers is like, wait, did I rip that off from you and put it in that song? I'm going to give you publishing on Van Weezer on that song specifically. And then, no, I thought you read it first, because everyone was hanging out there doing backyard parties. Everyone's hanging out at the Amherst house. The In the Garage isn't just about Weezer, which I had thought for 30 years. Why would geeks have a wider, like, group of friends? You know what I mean? Like, when I met Jason, I was like, oh, this guy had a separation with Weezer. Oh, that stinks, because, like, those geeks are on their own. This guy must really be on his own. But then know that, like, he's caught by this community is pretty awesome. And that was a revelation to me, was that the stories about the Amherst house and everything that came out of it, I thought was so cool.
That place was incredible. I mean, legendary. Going to parties there was ridiculous. Sitting down at the drum set, I went there after Weezer had moved out and Shufflepuck had taken it over. And I think at its peak, I'm going to say about 12 people lived there in a 2-bedroom with 1 bathroom. There was always gear set up in the garage. So you could go in there at any moment during a party, just hanging out. Let's go jam. And so you would sit in that garage, and then you're a drummer like me. You can't help yourself but to play the beginning of Undone, right? The drum fill. to sit in that garage and feel that, or to see Soma playing there, or to see Shufflepuck playing there and rehearse, or at a party where they would just openly perform with the kitchen door open and people had to kind of cram to get their heads in. A lot of magical nights in that house. And I was there after the Weezer era. And so anything I wrote about in the book, the actual Weezer era, that you'll have to talk to Jason about that, because I wasn't around at that time.
Well, Eric's going to build a time machine, and I think you guys are going to end up with 13 people are going to be living in that house.
I've joked, if I ever do get a time machine, I'm going back to January 1st, 1990 and living in LA, living on a 10-year loop. And I'm going to see all of these shows until I'm done, because what an incredible just era. And I grew up in Florida, and in Orlando, we had, just like 5 to 10% of what was going on out here. And it was, anytime a band would come through, it was just like revelatory, because nobody came there. And you was talking about the Honda Civic tour that Weezer took Ozma and Get Up Kids on. I went to that show 2 consecutive nights because of how excited I was to see, these bands that I love. And since then, I've seen, I think the 3 of them have combined, I don't know, 30 times or something like that. I'm going to see Get Up Kids in a couple months. So it was, just to have experienced all of that in real time now here in LA must have been incredible. And and especially during a boom time, there's scenes everywhere, but all of a sudden the scene's exploding and people are getting signed left and right, and there's label representatives every show. And I can't imagine how exciting that must have been for all of you to experience that.
Jason, the scene that I romanticize a lot, it's no offense to the LA geek scene, but it's the Gilman Street scene, because I love Green Day and I love the MTX and I love all those bands that came out of Gilman. I mean, I met our buddy Eric there because he was wearing a Jawbreaker shirt in an elevator there in Orange County right before the Green Day shirt. Remember that? I was like, that guy has a Jawbreaker shirt. I like that guy. He's the man. But a lot of those bands that they were dealing with in early 90s, when the Suits swooped in and started talking to Rancid and Exop Ivy and all those bands, was the idea of a sellout. Like, oh my God, those guys sold out. And, Rancid didn't get the deal later on from Warner Brothers that they got offered when they were early in the 90s, when Radiohead and Rancid were supposed to be the big pops, and it took them a few years later, or an album or 2 later, to get what they were going to get, because everybody was afraid of the sellout. Reading this book, y'all were regular people, man. Like, y'all were working regular jobs. You didn't have any of that punk rock, chip on the shoulder about selling out. Y'all wanted this as a career. Is that true, Jason? Like, y'all were like, I mean, you're talking about the job you had during this era, and I was like, no, fuck, he wanted to get out of there. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. I mean, there is a wonderful tradition of, blue collar, do it yourself artists. Here in the Bay Area, I live in Oakland. I was just over on Gilman to get my car fixed the other day, and I drive past the cannery, the 924, and I saw Green Day there. I saw Primus around the corner at the Omni before, they became sort of a household name. Bands like that, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And there, at one point, I think there were more artists, like people who would, just paint the lake or trees or, each other here in the Bay Area, more artists per capita than almost anywhere else, any other, metropolitan area in North America. I don't think it's like that anymore because it's so expensive to live here. But the idea of being able to support yourself as an artist at whatever level did have political, ramifications, striation. And there was a scene of people who were like, oh, very, very cliquish, very, the idea of you're a sellout because you're working with a major label. I mean, I don't know if it has to do with some sort of revolutionary concepts or Marxist, alienation of the means of production or some nonsense like that. But I mean, don't hate the player, hate the game, right?
Right.
If you can figure it out. And I mean, when Weezer got on MTV, I was just thinking, it's been a long time, but it's still, all the memories are right there. And I remember walking up to the Virgin Megastore, and I would go up there and I would thumb through, the magazines, and one of them was Billboard. And around Christmas of, I think it was 1994, when 10 times as many CDs were selling, in countries where people are stuffing stockings with CDs. And Weezer was like number 14 in the top 200, and there were the little asterisks or whatever it was for, oh, it's gone platinum this many times or whatever. And I remember looking at it and thinking, oh my good, I was, I didn't understand about record sales until that, because it was kind of happening by degrees to them and sort of to me. And I was like, whoa, it's really happening. Like they're not coming back. They're not going to come back down to earth. They're just going to stay in orbit. And they became a household name, and so great, fantastic. Yes, more of that for people.
Yeah, but that's something that Justin talks about when Shufflepuck first started. Matt Sharp literally took them around, Justin and Adam, and introduced them to bookers around town and said, Weezer's taking off, so here's your next band that can fill the club for you. And that's how it got handed along. And again, that came from those guys paying it forward to their friends who lived in the house with them, and they grew up playing music together. To the sellout thing, it's interesting. I grew up in Hermosa Beach, in the Hermosa Beach area, sort of in the cradle of hardcore punk. And so I kind of came a little bit more from that scene where selling out was like a concern. I got over it eventually, but
it doesn't exist anymore. You don't hear it anymore. But like the other great oral history book that I love is We Made a Scene.
Yeah.
And that book is incredible.
Yeah.
But
there's a book called Selling Out or Sellout that came out last year. That's really good. But, I was playing I had lived in Europe after college, and I moved home, and I was an arts editor for the weekly free paper in my hometown. And I was playing in a couple bands. One of them was a Forbidden Beat hardcore band called the Fish Sticks. And our logo was the Black Flag logo, except it was fish sticks.
Of course.
And then I was in an instrumental surf band that really just ended up being a hardcore punk band called Bookmobile. And we were both tied to a little
you can't tour in cars. You cannot tour in cars if you do that. You have to tour in a Bookmobile.
Theologian Records, that put out Pennywise's first record and then blew that whole scene up down there. And so those are the bands that I'm in at the time. And I'm like not interested in anything happening in Hollywood unless it's a band I want to go see. And Marco from Popsicle and Sugar Cult, who was the bass player in my best friend's band, Popsicle, called me and said, there's this band in Hollywood that needs a drummer. You should try out. And I was like, I don't want to drive to Hollywood 5 nights a week. He's like, you should go check them out. And that band ended up being Lunchbox, which when I joined changed its name to Ridel High. And that's how I got into this scene. But I had come from a world where selling out was a concern, and it's kind of funny and kind of charming and cute to think about in retrospect that people were worried about making a living as an artist.
It's insane.
A funny thing.
It was so refreshing reading this book and realizing that this scene didn't have that accusation, like that accusatory tone of they're not of this anymore because they sold out. They're not, I remember my friends in Austin when Out Comes the Wolves came out, and you see the Minor Threat like homage cover, which they called a ripoff, and you started hearing ska return to a Rancid album. They got rid of all their Op Ivy stuff. They were furious. They were like, "This is garbage. This is selling out." Da, da, da. And I just remember being like, "This is ridiculous. What are you guys doing? If the music's good, you should enjoy the music. Like, what do you?" They were older punks than me, but I didn't think that the whole sellout thing. It didn't hold water. So it was refreshing for me to read in Generation Blue that accusatory and almost drawing the lines between the sellouts and the non-sellouts, the people who kept it real for the scene, it wasn't necessarily present in this Hollywood geek scene. Everyone just wanted each other to succeed. And again, Jason, I love you, man. But my heart breaks with the Weezer split, because you're my guy. And keep in mind, like I PA'd on some music videos. One of them was a Weezer video. Brian Bell looked out for me personally. I still love Brian, but
Brian's a good man. Brian's a good dude.
You're my dude, Jason. You remembered me after 24 years.
Well, I told Steve this turns out Brian had a job before he joined Weezer at a recording studio called Ocean Way. And a few years later, after, a failed Chopper One, debut failure in the major label game, right? Didn't get on MTV, didn't sell, 10,000, 100,000 records or whatever. And I came off the road and, no job and no place to live and no money. And I ended up with a job at the same studio doing what he had been doing. So we literally traded lives, right? It just silly little connections like that.
And Jason, one of the people who interned at that studio, Ocean Way, was a redhead 6'3" kid named Kevin McCaffrey, who was my co-host in college radio, which is how I met you, Jason.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my God. Geekscape is it's all
this is a cultural cultural wheelhouse.
SW Lauden's gonna write a book called The Oral History of Geekscape.
Yes. I'm signing up. That would be very interesting. But my band after Ridel High, Czar, recorded at Ocean Way. That studio is like legendary.
Legendary. And I saw you guys, Czar, before I knew you were a member of Czar. All I remember is how amazing you're completely theatrical your lead was. Your lead singer, all that stuff. Like it really, you guys were a bit glam and all this. I went to see the Dolly Rots in Hollywood, and you guys were part of the bill.
That was like 2013. That was like later, right?
Yeah, brother.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
I was telling Steve I saw Czar on tour with the Marvelous 3 and SR-71 when it must have been your first tour out, I would assume.
The second tour. Our first tour out was with Duran Duran.
Oh,
holy crap!
Now that's a match.
Yeah.
Czar was great. Czar was a great band.
Czar was great. And Jason, I just didn't want to cut you off, but I think it's beautiful that someone that like you didn't get thrown out. Like you weren't just discarded. Like Chopper One had its swings. Like we played you guys on the radio. We loved you. You were still part of the scene. And again, like Geekscape is, if you want a positive book about community, you don't even have to be a fan of music, but Geekscape right here. To get serious, our Scott Roger, one of our horror podcasters over on Horror Movie Night, I didn't have Scott's phone number until this past weekend, and I was talking to Matt Kelly, who runs the network, who's a co-host of Scott's, and I said, how you doing, this and that? And he told me that Scott's father had passed away 2 weeks ago, Scott. So I'm sorry I'm late on acknowledging that. I didn't know. And I immediately got Scott's phone number, and I texted Scott, who I've never met in person, but Horror Movie Night, they get more viewers than this show does. And we're the flagship show, but we're like 7th or 8th in our own rankings, which is fine. This is about community. And I texted Scott and I said, hey, Scott, listen, man, I love you, man. I've known you for years because of the show you're doing for Geekscape. And just to know, like, if you need anything, let me know. I know we haven't met in person, but I've known you for years and I love you. And then I put ... And this whole Geekscape thing isn't just about podcasting, right? And so I say that story because even though Generation Blue is about the geek rock scene of Hollywood in the mid-90s to the 2000s, I want to keep pushing on this, that you don't have to be a music fan to enjoy SW's book. This is about a community, and it can be about the tech industry. It can be about movies. I've read tons of those. It can be about comic books, and man, I'd love to read more of those too. But this is about a community in a moment, and how the ties between them helped each other up. And Geekscape is like, this is why this is an awesome book to read, no matter what your geek, taste is, right? Would you say that? I don't know. Maybe I'm just put it when you reissue it. Maybe it goes a little quote right there. This is a book about love.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, right? Like when I set out to write the book, that there was no compilation or vinyl originally attached to it in the quote unquote blueprint for this project. I wanted to tell the story of being part of this amazing community and all the bonds we made and all the amazing experiences we had, because it was about community. It was this thing that against all odds, as Carl says in the foreword, that Weezer managed to build. And then all these other people got attracted to it. And when Weezer left, we carried the flag forward. And then the next generation came, and the next generation came. Like, I remember playing shows with like Jason Cropper's band or Drill Team or, Shufflepuck or, whoever, Nerf Herder. And the Ozma kids were like teenagers who would show up at our all ages show. And, like Jose from Ozma, the guitar player, his AOL name was Ridel Guy, and they're like a decade younger than us, but they showed up and they were super enthusiastic and they were really cool kids and they were knowledgeable about the music. And a couple of them were part of the Weezer fan club and they were dialed into that universe. And so we all kind of like, whether intentionally or inadvertently, took them under our wing and started playing shows with them. And to this day, I tell Jose, who played in the last version of Ridel High that played on Sunday, he played guitar in the band with us. I still think of him as 15. I still think of him as a kid that I'm rooting for. And to have watched their success was amazing to me. Like, I felt invested in them winning. And that is real community as far as I'm concerned. And I do think we had all the petty jealousies. There was a fair amount of boyfriend, girlfriend swapping and people getting kicked off bills and all the stuff that happens in rock scenes. But I would say, Jason, and I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but I think by and large, it was a really positive, mutually supportive scene in retrospect.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Looking back on it, I wouldn't have thought then that my love of playing music and wanting to play in bands or make records, play shows, all of the trappings of, the Amherst, real life enactment of a Monkees, TV show right before reality TV. And it's just happy you're just there witnessing it. I wouldn't have thought that, I didn't think then that I would look back on it and love all these people so much the way I do. But I can't imagine feeling this warm and fuzzy about a high school reunion or a college reunion, though I haven't really partaken of those things because this was really my community at that age. But there are some really nice, tight bonds, and people really admire each other. When I walked into the rehearsal room Saturday before the show down in LA, and Shuffle Puck were playing, and I could tell from outside of the building, even though it was very muffled, I'm like, that's Shuffle Puck. I know the sound of that band, and I love the sound of that band. And the songs aren't super deep. They're kind of, just like straight ahead rock tunes, but you get in front of them and you're watching them play, and there's so much emotion and so much connectivity, and they sound great. And it took me right back. And I love those guys. I really do. And seeing people like Christian Stone alive and well, and, people went through, serious personal dilemmas, in the 90s in Hollywood. Some of us did. And I'm so glad that, we still have a little bit of time together.
Yeah. Beautiful thing.
That Sunday, and Eric, I know you were cursing that you couldn't be there. Dude, I love you, man. I was texting you from Big Bear being like, dude, you got to come to this thing.
It's like 10 o'clock and I have, just to geek it out, an all-day Risk game that I've been planning for weeks, and I just could not get away to get down there. So
you told me your girl was sick.
No, that's that. Well, she was also that, but that's why
you're making stuff up, dude. You could have canceled the Risk game.
No, it sounds pretty geeky, Jonathan.
It's very geeky, but you can have a Risk game another weekend. Well, these guys, this was a one-time thing, man. This is where I'm leaning with this. It felt pretty good, didn't it, guys? Is it a one-time thing, or are we going to return to a Poptopia type thing where maybe we bring some of these bands together and bring this forward? And maybe have a bit more celebrations down the road.
I mean, it sounds like a Geekscape festival, music fest might be in the works.
Related, some of our Geekscape people are touring together. Weedus, where Matt Milligan, or the bassist Matt Milligan, is a Geekscape podcaster, and Mega Ran are touring together in Europe, and I was like, Weedus and Mega Ran together, that's basically a Geekscape tour. Geekscape podcasters touring together. But no, I'm sorry, Steve, what were we going to say about the potential of a maybe future Poptopia type event?
Well, so what's really interesting is it's been a long time since I've booked shows, right? But I helped put that show together on that Sunday, and I really didn't know what to expect. What was important to me was that it was early, and that it was all ages, because I really wanted our kids to be able to come and
Right.
see this thing and experience it. And that was an incredibly beautiful thing. The amount of teenagers and college kids that were there was beautiful, including my own. For my own kids to be able to see this thing that meant so much to me, and have them comment afterwards like, "Dad, you were so happy all day." And I was like, "Yeah, those are some of my oldest, closest friends." So all ages and early explains itself. But my wife was like, "Man, it's going to be packed." And I'm like, "Nah, we'll be lucky to get 50 people there." And then she was right. I was like blown away by the turnout. Consequently, 2 bookers contacted me the next day and offered up, do you want to do this venue? Could you get the same bill to do this? Or could you? And I was like, look, I'm not booking anything else. That was a one-time thing for me, but I will tell you this. Ridel High is a yes if you put a bill together. And
I know a guy, Steve, who puts together these Risk games.
I heard his wife is sick.
I can offer up my living room for free.
No, damn it! Come on, man. You are a Hollywood writer. That means you can be a Hollywood producer, and you can put this thing together, Eric.
This is actually my lottery dream: is to put on a festival, and that's if I ever win the mega. Or
you don't have to win the mega. You sell the tickets. Come on, all musicians are wealthy.
It would be for charity. Because what do I need $200 million for? Nobody needs that.
You can be the new Kevin Lyman of the nerd core.
But that is I missed it that a couple weeks ago, but I would love to see another show like that. Jason, are you currently playing in a band?
I have a band. Yeah, I just play as Jason Cropper, or the Jason Cropper Band. And we've just been doing shows around, the East Bay and San Francisco, North Bay. And then every once in a while, I've been going out to Las Vegas and playing with this fantastic send-up of the 90s and aughts. This guy, Stephen Wesley, has a band, and he's been playing casinos out there. I think he's doing Orange County House of Blues in July.
That's where we met, Eric, at the Green Day concert.
It is.
You said you'd never heard of them.
And it's just tons of members of 90, like everybody from Sidemen from One Republic to Third Eye Blind to Michael Ward, who passed away from the Wallflowers, was playing with him, and so it's like a cover band with ex-members of that.
Let's go.
It's fun.
Matt Fuller plays in that, right? Doesn't Matt Fuller from Puddle of Mud done that?
That's right. Matt Fuller from Puddle of Mud, and when he was he's a sideman for the Ridel High / AM radio world. Yeah, he's an incredibly talented guy.
You guys still talk to Darren Pfeiffer, who I met I used to shoot videos for Drive Thru Records, and I met him through Richard Raines, who shot a lot of the videos in that scene. But Darren Pfeiffer was with Chopper One, or wasn't he one of the drummers that you guys brought in?
Darren was he moved out to LA from Buffalo and joined that scene, and he and I were going to play together, but then he joined Goldfinger, and
now he does punk rock karaoke and a bunch of stuff.
Sure, and he's a tour man. He's out there with Rich Kids on LSD, I think, tour managing them right now.
Dude,
we're close friends. Yeah,
I saw Scotty from the Nerf Herder guy, and he kind of looks like Darren. And I saw him at Monrovia, and I was like, "Hey, Darren!" And he's like, "My name is Scotty," and I was like, "Sorry,
awkward
about that," because I never met Scotty, but I met Darren many times, and oops, I guess that didn't meet him enough to know him. Listen, give me a number, Steve. How many of these books do we need to move for you to put this show back together? Come on, man. This Risk guy, you got to know. We just moved another book. George Pepe in Kansas City just said, "Book and album ordered. I'm going to be the coolest kid in Kansas City." George Pepe, congratulations on your recent nuptials. I love you, buddy, and you are already to me the coolest kid in Kansas City, because my college roommate and I don't talk anymore, and he moved back to. Never mind. Jack Knife says, "I still haven't forgiven Jonathan when he announced the last episode of Geekscape at a live show, and then it was only a troll job." Yeah, you're gonna have to pry. The last episode of Geekscape will be from a casket, folks. George Pepe then says, and he does book shows. He goes, "I book in Kansas City just in case y'all are touring across the country." I think I'm gonna hammer this point, guys. When are we doing this? When are we need to put together some more pop shows together, because that venue you guys had in Monrovia, I love it, but a little too tight. A lot of people in a small space.
There is a booker working in the background, and I said, if you were able to put the show together, then my band will play. And so he's working behind the scenes right now, and if he is able to work his magic, then you could see a similar bill in the summertime in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Dream.
Here's negotiation time.
Okay.
If you're watching, Mr. Booker, Geekscape is a free media sponsor. It doesn't matter, whatever you need us to do, flyer, whatever. I got this guy. All he does is play Risk. He can flyer with me, and we are going to promote your concert when it happens. Just not too close to my baby's marriage my baby's birth in the first week of August, and don't do it at Comic-Con. That's the 26th to 28th of July. So please, but that's what we're gonna do. Airfare for Mr. Cropper. We don't want any cheap stuff, all right? We don't want any of that. What is it? Freedom Airlines?
No,
none of
Frontier.
that stuff. Frontier. Okay. Yeah, I don't want them riding with no chickens in the back. Okay. And then what other bands we want to see on this? I'm just going to put the whole thing together right now. We're going to get the bookie agent on it. A little negotiation. A Geekscape sponsored LA pop concert. What do you think? Let's do it right now.
I think that you volunteering to be the media partner was enough. And if the booker, who I will not name, is watching or listening, then I'm sure they're very excited. I'll check my text. Yes, I'm getting texts right now.
Get out of here.
Something about their people contacting your people. I think I know what that means.
In all honesty, the fact that there's rumblings gives me hope. I love it. And no Frontier Airlines for Jason. At worst, we're getting him a Southwest ticket. You got that?
Well, it's going to be a really fun year for all Weezer fans because of the Blue Album anniversary. So,
which is Friday? No, Saturday.
Wow,
Friday or Saturday. The 10th is the anniversary of that. And there's another record that came out the same day that I was like, wow, what a day that was. I have to look it up.
Oh yeah, who was it?
I'm gonna. Sorry about the clicking, everyone, but I'm going to. I'll type softly. 1994 was one of the most incredible years for music, just period. And if you look down just the list of albums that came out,
well, the Punchline Boys did a cover EP of songs from '94. They included, I think, a Weezer song. They definitely included Wallflowers. They definitely included Beck.
There was a couple other little releases that same day as Weezer's Blue Album. Sunny Day Real Estate's Diary and Sonic Youth's Experimental Jet Set, Trash and No Star.
Cool.
As much as people credit Pinkerton as being part of the proto or part of the emo phase, I think that Sunny Day Real Estate album is probably as responsible for a lot of that stuff that turned
100%.
into emo. That's awesome.
Definitely Maybe came out in 94. Dookie came out in 94. Smash came out in 94. Like, that was a big year for alternative rock.
It was probably the best. Either 93 or 94 is probably the best year.
Yeah. And my favorite band of all time, MTX's Maybe Our Bodies Ourselves, came out that year. Maybe.
My favorite band of all time also released an album that year, Monster. REM. That was a huge year for REM. And a great record.
And REM kind of played the role that Weezer did in that scene. If you get anything from the book, We Built the Scene, is that by the time the 90s started to roll around, REM had taken a lot of those bands out that then turned into the big alternative bands of the early 90s. And so REM kind of played that role that Weezer did, where it's like, hey, we're gonna take you out on tour and we're gonna try and get you guys over. And again, there's that chapter in the book Geeks gave us, and you're going to want to pick it up. It's called Generation Blue. You guys can pick it up at bigstirrecords.com. It is a album. You're going to read, you're going to listen to some music. Maybe we'll put together a documentary film. I'm just throwing all these things at you, Steve. And
I'm in.
And I just got to tell you, like, the cool thing was, like, Weezer takes out the Get Up Kids in Ozma, and they come back and they get more opportunities. And
I mean, look, the thing about Ozma was, this is how beautiful the fan club, the Weezer fan club, was back then. Like, we all got the opportunity to play backyard parties or parties that were thrown in clubs by the Weezer fan club. Ozma on those first two big tours were fan voted. they put it up to fan votes, and Ozma won, and Weezer took them out.
God,
And they
I
were playing
forgot
like
about that.
in these huge venues. But like when Shuffle Puck was trying to get signed, Weezer had them open for them at the Palladium. Weezer had them open for them at Universal Amphitheater on the same bill as Teenage Fan Club. Shuffle Puck, Teenage Fan Club, and Weezer at Universal Amphitheater. Shuffle Puck opening up. When Ridel High was on My Records in Santa Barbara, this was the original album cover. Joey Cape produced our album, the singer from Lagwagon, and Ryan Green produced it, engineered it. He was the Fat Records guy. We were trying to go from My Records to A&M Records, and A&M Records was on the fence. And so Weezer took us out for 4 dates on the West Coast, and that made A&M go like, oh, they must be legit. So they signed us because Weezer took us out. And that,
you guys were part of that.
Nothing changed at all, and that became Emotional Roller Coaster. Same exact record, new cover.
And Steve, that whole A&M flip that happened that also took like MXPX's Outcome to Buffalo and that whole, all those albums that were so promising that had been signed to A&M, it was all part of that flip, wasn't it? Where it was like suddenly nobody's running the place and they can't get these things out and promoted.
They picked us up. So we ended up, because I got sat next to the super manager Rich Egan at a wedding, he ended up picking up Ridel High. And he had just signed Face to Face to A&M. And he got us on A&M. We shot a video for Self-Destructive with Jerry Casale from Devo, who plays a clown in the video, where we're on a game show called Self-Destructive. And if you look over my head, the blue sign up there says Steve was my nameplate from the game show on the video.
Devo is managed by the manager of Real Big Fish, who I shot some of my early music videos for. It's just like, it's all just in the same group.
So they did all that.
Yeah.
They did all that, and then they released our record, and I think the week that our record came out, everybody got pink slipped.
Yeah.
So the next week, they were like, you can have the record back, sorry. So they just gave us the record back and dropped us, and a record that almost came out twice is kind of what the Ridel High record was.
What year was that, Steve?
We did 45 with an A&R person from Atlantic in 95, and that got a little play on The End in Seattle, which got labels interested. Mm-hmm. We released the High Scores, which is what the original album was originally called, on My Records in 96, and we re-released that record as Emotional Roller Coaster in 97.
That's crazy.
And then Napster started like a year and a half later, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Remember, I think it's just insane. We all thought that it was insane when what's his name from 9 Inch Nails was saying put out your music for free and sell t-shirts and tours. You remember that blog? Sure. And it was like, whoa, Trent Reznor just said to put out the music for free. Is he crazy? And now no comment. It's intense. I give that to film students, Geekscape, as a warning to maybe film as well, because like who knows where it's going to go. But let's not be sad. Let's be happy because we're going to get ourselves a pop show this summer featuring all these bands.
Yeah, and a documentary and a
tour. We keep going. It's going to be great. I'd say documentary because it was that Gilman Street documentary that they did on that Gilman one. And I remember going to see that and enjoying it because I love that scene. Geekscape is the one thing I want you to take from this is that you're going to go over it. You're going to right now, maybe you're listening to this on your iPhone or on computer. You're going to go and you're going to type in bigstirrecords.com. You're going to pick up a copy of Generation Blue. You're going to be like, wow, it's a book and an album. And you're going to enjoy it because I know we've shared some stories here on the last hour, but there are so many more stories that are awesome. And again, you don't have to just be a fan of the music to enjoy it. Steve's done a great job of really pushing that it's about community and it's about love and positivity and holding on to a moment that may not ever be replicated. But damn, if we're not going to try this summer.
When we take the documentary on the road to all the film festivals.
When we play a concert here, you can play. There'll be some gaming for Risk, and then some concerts. And then
we can create a scene
center.
Version of Risk,
a comic book trade,
where we just set up each venue as a different land to be conquered. This is great.
It's just Los Angeles and Kansas City. And
In
that's
Kansas
it.
City.
So far, so good. We just need a couple more cities.
Los
Bigster.com.
Angeles, Kansas City, and Irkutsk or Irkutsk.
It's Saskatchewan is calling. Bigsterrecords.com. Geekscape is where you can pick up the copy of the book and the album. Steve has you have a blog, a newsletter, a Substack.
Yeah.
What's the best way to find the Substack, Steve?
It's called Remember the Lightning, which is named after a famous power pop song by the LA power pop band 2020. And it is probably 3 or 4 posts a week on Substack. It's free. And I do a semi-annual print journal. And the third one comes out. This is the first issue. It had the whiffs on the cover. The third one comes out this Friday, and it's got a really killer story about the 50th anniversary of Big Stars Radio City by Rich Topeka, who actually wrote the book about Chris Bell. So we're really excited about that.
Eric is now your new biggest fan.
Yeah. Did you get to go to any of the Big Star shows? They did them a few years ago. They did them for 3, and they had it was at the Alex in Glendale. I went to one. It was like Robin Hitchcock and Mike Mills and all recreating 3, and it was just it was awesome. I remember one. I don't remember
which the 30th anniversary of Number One Record, which was 2 years ago. Yeah,
that was a great show, and I remember Mike Mills playing a basketball, and that was the best memory of the night.
I was going to ask George Pepe about the Whiffs if he was a Whiffs fan. And
George Pepe just came in, audio listeners. He just jumped in and said, the Whiffs are from Kansas City. We can make this happen.
I love the Whiffs. They are such a great band.
They are awesome. I stumbled onto them last year. I was like, these guys are great.
I'm following them right now on streaming.
It's all coming there. And Geekscape is follow Jason on Instagram. He is constantly working with bands that are like, I just listened to some of the music that you've got that you play in your Instagram stories and videos, dude. And I love that you're still producing bands involved in music. Some of the stuff is really eclectic. He's got this native group from New Mexico that does freaking, like you said, it's like reggae or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what the F?
A few different people from that scene, some native flute players who are Cody Blackbird and his band Blackbird. I think they're touring with Blues Traveler a little bit this summer. We did John Popper played on some tracks I co-wrote with them and produced for them. And, it's definitely in the spirit of the Gilman at this little studio I have here in Oakland. And if I don't have an artist to work with, I just go in and, try to write like this one's going to be like the Blue Album. This one's going to be like, Chopper One. This one's going to be like, the heavy metal bands that I wish I had played in, in my life where I wasn't a grunge artist, or whatever, right? Like just it's all fantasy. It's all part of my rock and roll fantasy, literally. So.
And Jason, where's the best place for us to follow you on that if you're listening and you want to check out some of that music or some of the things that you produce?
I look at Instagram. I don't have anything for sale right now. I have like 3 albums worth of material that I'm just sitting on and like, wondering if I ever want to release and share. And, it was great to see Steve do the album and got me thinking about, well, I have a book that I haven't released and I have a few albums I haven't released. So maybe.
Geekscape Records and Tapes.
Dude, Jason, you're driving me crazy with this, man.
Sorry.
Let's get this out there. We're already making some comics. I released the cover of one of the Super Action Man issues like this week. Like, bro, you're making me crazy. You're breaking my heart. Let's get this stuff out there. Let's get it in the fans' hands. Let's get it out in time for the LA show this July.
The festival in Kansas City.
That's a festival.
I miss Michael and Carly. I wish they were here to help me with it. They were so like.
But Jason, there are other people. Like, no offense to Michael and Carly, they're unparalleled. But Geekscape doesn't exist without Matt Kelly. It doesn't exist without Scott Roger or any of the people who've helped Geekscape in the last 18 years and the community that keeps it going. And Jason, like, you're talented and people love your music. I know a guy who all he does is play Risk, and he, we can figure this out, brother. We can figure this out, brother.
Okay, well,
You're telling me a bunch of untalented rappers are going to dump their stuff on SoundCloud, and we can't get you to put stuff up on, like, what is it, Bandcamp Fridays? You can't just do some Bandcamp up in this?
Sure. I'll tell you this, Jonathan. I have a record that I've been trying to finish, not just keep tinkering on.
Sure.
And I've been working with a guy who actually worked on, I think he worked on the Green album, Alan Sanderson, a guy I met at Ocean Way, really great, record producer, engineer. So we're in the final stages of mixing and getting ready to master. We have like 12 songs. So,
and Kai Dodson, who came to the concert, you guys know Kai, he's been on the Geekscape a few times, and he's part of that Santa Barbara scene because he was in, what's the name of that? The younger kids. I saw him with Nerf Herder. Kai Dodson. Kai, I'm sorry. Let me find your band, and they do a bunch of stuff, but he does production now. We can do this.
Yeah, there's a lot of music. There's a lot of new music I've been stockpiling, so we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Geekscape, we have a ton to look forward to, and Eric is like, I'm sorry, Eric, I can't make him put the music out faster.
Hurry.
Okay.
Generation Blue. Generation Blue. Generation Blue. Generation Blue.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What was that name again?
I'm sorry. I can't make them put the music out any faster. But Geekscape, you have a lot to look out for, or look forward to. If anything happens, Geekscape, we will put it out here on Geekscape. We'll talk about it here. We'll promote it. Because again, this is a community, and when people come in and they say, "Hey, can Geekscape promote this or talk about this?" And I say, "Yeah, dude, the fans will want to hear about that." And why? How do I know? I'm one of them. So I know you're gonna love this book. BigStirRecords.com. Order a copy. You get music and you get a book. Guys, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Really, really great. And thanks for inviting Eric on. I know he had to skip a Risk game for this, so it's meaningful to me.
My hourly Risk game can wait.
Eric is a very busy. Eric, I know you're writing new stuff. You're a writer, you're a TV writer. You have an extensive list of TV credits. But man, that strike was real, and we got put in our keisters, didn't we?
All joking aside, Eric and I actually, after I realized he was going to be co-hosting, we were chatting earlier today and going back and forth with some stories. So you made a friendship. In addition to the documentary and the record label and
all the checks I wrote,
and
I got tour,
cash you made a friendship between Eric and I. It's probably the best thing that happened today.
Yes, I am greatly appreciative, and Steve, I can't wait for you to come on. Jason, I'm inviting you to my 90s whatever podcast / radio show. Play a bunch of music, talk about it. Would love to have you on if you've got some time.
Yeah,
Steve's coming on. Jonathan's going to come on.
And guys, it's called 90s whatever. He's not being dismissive of
no, that is which
it's called 90s whatever. You can find it on Spotify. Yeah.
And also on Instagram, 90s, it's underscore, or 90s spelled out underscore whatever.
Okay. And you're also Pop Killer on Instagram, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Pop, it's really funny tagging you in this stuff. I was like, oh, he's synonymous with Pop. He loves it dearly.
Well, it's funny. That name came from, there was a band in the 90s I saw out with Third Eye Blind called Coward. And this was like the early AOL days. And everybody had an AOL handle that was like, Jerry12578Q. And I wanted something clean without numbers. And I was just looking at this CD. And the guy from Coward is a huge producer, songwriter. He produced Best Day of My Life by American Authors. It was such a big hit 10ish years ago. And they had a song called Popularity Kills, and it just went from there. And I was like, oh, that's a great name. Turns out it's also the name of some store. It's down, I think, in Japan and in Little Tokyo, and I think on Sunset at one point, and didn't know that for years. And now it's also the name of a Polish DJ blog, I believe. So I have this weird ring of non sequiturs.
Bouncing something right now? Are you doing something with your hands about? Geekscape, Kai Dodson's band is Army of Freshmen, and I'm sorry for the mind blink on that one, but I know he produces stuff, and maybe he'd help you out, Jason. Maybe he'd get this stuff faster to the fans.
Yeah,
all right.
Make some introductions. I'd be happy to talk with anybody at this point. It's just about time.
I know he's a fan because he was at your show last Sunday and he loves it. All right, Geekscapists, you know where to find us. Just search Geekscape on all the socials and all that stuff. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends. Hit the share button and let people know, like, oh, this is cool. They don't just talk about comics, movies, and video games. We do that a lot, but I also like to talk to storytellers. It's what I'm addicted to, and we've had some great ones here today. Again, the book is Generation Blue. Again, you can find it at bigstarrecords.com, and you can find us here next week for more audio or video Geekscape. Just subscribe. If you leave us those 5 stars, it really helps our visibility, helps me convince people that we're not just nobodies, and we can get you guys some cool guests to talk to. All right, we got some cool stuff headed into Comic-Con this summer, so please, maybe we'll get Steve or somebody down at Comic-Con promoting the book at our booth in San Diego. He can be around a bunch of comic kids. But we got all these cool plans. So you want to be a part of it? Subscribe, share it with your friends and all that. Geekscape loves you. Don't hate, create, and all that. Thanks, guys, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you guys next time. Peace, everybody.